Everyone, I hope you had some decent sleep because this is partly going to be interesting, partly going to be boring, but mostly very useful for building your level. I'll start with who am I? I'm Buijtenweg, third-year DP. I've played a lot of shooters, as in a lot, over 10,000 hours. If you consider that you generally spend 8,742 hours in IGAT, to get to the degree, I could have had that one by now. I played the semi-professional level for 6 years, roughly, playing Team Focus Classic and Quake 3, and I designed this level, which doesn't screen. So this was a 1,000-hour project, roughly. Just to give you some sense of scope, how much hours this takes and how important it is for a designer to not make mistakes in the start. Because if you want to change something halfway the project, you're causing a few hundred extra hours of work. While in your design phase this could take 10 minutes.
The camera could go into the teleport and come out the other side.
What you'll see here is the white box, how I deliver the level and how the differences with how the artists make it. You will experience that if your levels are going to be built, that it's going to be a nightmare if they start changing things, because it completely destroys your gameplay. So if you're going to have your level built with artists, be sure to communicate with them which are vital aspects to your design, which parts are not. But that's all after this block. As you can see, that route changed quite a bit because it didn't play out that well. And a lot of credits that are not that interesting. Short summary of what I'm going to be covering today. Just a very short basic look at level design and how a very simple change can impact the entire game. First person shooter player motivation, as in why do players play shooters and what drives them to move around in a level and how you can use that as a designer. Designing effective spaces, as in what are the functions of each room in your level and how you can use those, once again, to let your players move around to prevent them from staying in one place all the time. Flow and how that works. Visibility, also a big issue. And some little tips and tricks in UDK and things that you definitely shouldn't do what I did wrong. Basic level design. In my opinion, meaningful choice is the most important thing in a level. Whenever you have a level and you are in the room and there's no choice, just go forward or go back where you came from. There is no meaningful choice. You always want to have multiple directions, multiple things to do, multiple things to consider. The moment you have things to consider, like where's my opponent, where do I go, what is the best weapon I can pick up, what is the best armor I can pick up in this situation, you have choices and the player needs to think about what he's doing, creating an interesting level, creating a non-predictable level, which creates an interesting fight. So, some very basic simple things is chess is a very simple map, it's a mirror map. Is it balanced? Does anyone know? Oh, because it is not balanced because one player has to start. So that's the gigantic benefit of a first-person shooter. You all play at the exact same time. So technically, you can build a completely balanced system. And how much choice does chess have? Considering there are 17 million moves in the 10 first possible moves, is quite a lot of choice. And it's a very simple level. So what if we change that a bit? Basics of chess, still a mirror map, is it still balanced? Well, the rules are the same. Is there choice? I don't even want to know how many choices there are in the first 10 rules here. But is this still chess? Did you just break your game? Something to consider when you're building a level. One very, very popular map, Dust 2 for Counter-Strike. Well, it's definitely not a mirror map. Is it balanced? Well, actually yes. If you look at the online stats, this map roughly goes 50% win, 50% loss. So it has to be balanced. It's been played millions of times and it comes out roughly equal. Is there a lot of choice? Well, that is partly due to the map, partly due to the game mechanic of Counter-Strike and how it uses those two together. First of all, you have the choices of where you spawn. Generally the terrorists spawn here and the counter-terrorists spawn here. And in those situations, you have the choice. Do I cover both bomb sites? Do I cover one bomb site as the counter-terrorist? Or do we go rush the left side or the right side with the entire team as terrorists? This creates a situation where you need to buy weapons beforehand. Do we all buy long-range weapons? Do we buy close-range weapons? So the choices in the level determine what the player is going to buy, what kind of weapons he's going to use. This changes depending on the map. And you'll notice that on every map, players will use different weapons. So multiplayer level design is about creating choice. As you can see, not good versus bad, although possible. As in, going left is smarter than going right is a choice. Yes, it's not very exciting. Everyone that has played the level a few times knows that going left here is the better choice. And then it's not really a meaningful choice anymore. But the really interesting part is when you do game-changing choice. As in, do I go left now and get the quad damage and therefore have 30 seconds of being better than everyone else in the map? That is a game-changing choice where you can actually win by making proper choices. The harder these choices are to make, the more interesting the level becomes. Do I go for the yellow armor and possibly pick up the mega health, or can I only get the red armor? Or in UDK terms, that would be the shield belt, body armor, and Keka health. They're all the same, just different names. A lot of games have these exact same items, just call them different. And one very important thing to note is that all these choices involve movement. Hardly ever is the choice, I'm going to stick here, stand here, do nothing. And that's also because the longer you stand still, the less power-ups you pick up, the less weapons you pick up, effectively decreasing your chances of winning. Which leads to player motivation. Surviving long enough to shoot, kill, annihilate, and preferably humiliate your opponents. That is what killers do. And shooters tend to be catering to killers all the time. And this is what they will do all the time. And this is a little example of that. This is Fu, a long time, well, I think 2 years in a row, best Quake player in the world. Played a few times with him. Nice guy. And he's scary good.
It's like wire.
surviving long enough to shoot. What does it actually mean? Well, that requires a few basic things. First of all, being alive, obviously, but an opponent, because otherwise there's nothing to shoot, which is kind of the point. A weapon, preferably a big one, and you can already notice that if you place a rocket launcher somewhere, people are going to flock towards it massively. And any kind of buff that will increase my chances of winning. So, you know, a quad damage is really, really interesting for anyone that has a big weapon currently. And it's like, ooh, I do even more damage. This is a really interesting thing for designers to keep in mind. It's like, okay, do I place a U damage in a weapon really close to each other? Is that a smart choice? Isn't that a dominant strategy somewhere? And is there any way to defend against this? Is everyone just going to hide in a corner while someone has a U damage because it's too risky to go outside? And then kill an island, preferably humiliate your opponents. Yeah, this comes down to I want to win and I want to win more and preferably insult you while doing it. And the only way to do this is to cater a level that is counterintuitive to what you want from balancing. You want one player to be able to dominate the entire game, but you also want everyone to have the ability to get revenge and get back on top of the game. So it wants to be competitive, but you also, the player itself seeks to completely decimate and destroy. They don't care about the other player at all. It's not a co-op game whatsoever. And obviously they want the feedback. And you'll see that in this little clip. Notice all the little pop-ups and feedback.
Clips. And this guy shows you how to do it if you want to do it right. Now, for this clip, this has to be my personal favorite.
All the points, headshots.
It just starts off Overwatch beautifully.
Rescuer, all kinds of random awards thrown at you.
Let's watch
At the time I don't even know what they mean.
What's up? Through the smoke, does he have X-ray vision? Smoke screen dance? He smoke screen danced all over those guys. I don't know what else to say about that. This is my personal favorite clip. What's your favorite clip? Leave it below, let me know, and then finish watching out.
So, as you've noticed, in a lot of shooters, players will do anything to win. You will probably all seen some bug exploits of flying on little machines and clipping through walls, cheating in every possible way. And this has to do with the motivation of players. They will do anything to win. And you will see that the amount of cheaters actually in shooters is a lot higher than in any other game. And they will purposely try to break your game, either your map, or your game, or your mechanics, to get that advantage that they need. The cheating side is not really the designer's problem. However, the map and abusing it, that is. And there is something I need to show you on how you can break the mechanics of your map. Which is another Quake movie. Notice how the movement in this movie, the level is obviously not built for this movement. Exploits in the engine, which allows him to essentially fly through the entire level, including bunny hopping, trampling over little walls, and some really interesting examples. That jump does not land to be done. If that's a critical part to your level design, you have an issue. Short little heart piece being used to just jump up. So be careful with your heart pieces, even those can become gameplay objects. so he needs jump pads.
I'm doing this with the other level too, so.
Yeah, I can do this as well, that's not the point. The levels are not made for this. And the big issue there is that if a new player joins, he does not have this movement control. He does not know how this movement system works. He has no chance. Simple. Even if he's the best shot, playing due to being able to move that much better, faster, I will have the winning edge because I can get to the pickups faster, I can get to every location faster and more efficiently. And that ties into flow, which I'll explain in a bit. So it comes down to, do you know your game well enough? If you're designing your levels, the problem is if you're in pre-production and the game hasn't really been released to the public, you won't know all the exploits. That's what happened with Quake 3. Nobody really knew about the massive breaking of the jump controls on ledges. So people started abusing that. And there are things like vertical overbounces, which is literally you can jump down and jump the exact same height straight back without doing anything, just touching the ground, which is a bug. And people started abusing that. They actually made a gameplay feature out of that. So that's one of the things you need to consider is like, okay, what are the problems with my game? And do I try to work around them or do I simply accept them? And in this video, take note on how ramps are functioning. This is a video on Team Fortress Classic, and if none of you have ever played it, they have concussion grenades which launch you from the level at high speed. And due to the way the engine works, whenever you hit a ramp, you get launched up. And notice how they completely abuse that, and how the levels have been actually made to use this as a feature in the level. So here's the ramp, and you just keep on flying, and flying, and flying. It's all using the system. So you can imagine the game was not built for just flying through the middle of the map. Now 60 seconds. See how one little bug can change your entire game? Right. So be aware that some little features in the game might totally change your entire game, and that you can either incorporate it into your level design or try and avoid it. And avoiding it at times can be very difficult. Especially if the game has been out for a few years already, nobody's going to really make a patch that fixes all these issues. Team Fortress Classic has now been around for 16 years and these bugs are still in. So. And they actually accepted those. They never bothered to remove bunny hopping, for example. It's the Half-Life 1 engine. Counter-Strike still has bunny hopping. Still has bunny hopping, but has been slightly tweaked. In Team Fortress Classic, they simply never bothered because they accepted it as a feature. Anyway, on to designing effective spaces. This is very much a personal approach to how I build spaces in levels. Each area must have a function. I'll explain a bit what I mean with function. Each area must lead to at least two other functions. So not the same ones, but two other functions. After completing the function, an area should almost never be useful to stay in. As in, if you completed the function, as in I picked up a weapon, I picked up the armor, it should not be very appealing to stay here for the next 5 minutes. And try to stick with the triangle item placement, which is a thing that I'll spend quite some time on because it's not the easiest thing. So each area must have a function. What do I mean with that? You have the blue, red, yellow, green pickup, which translates into Kerga health, shield belt, body armor, and iPad. Or Heart of the Demon, golden armor, silver armor, bronze armor, and painkiller. All these games use the exact same pickup series. They have some minor differences between each game. The shield belt, for example, is a bit different, as in it completely prevents damage to the player instead of taking a percentage how it works in play, for example. But in general, the power of these items is Kegger health and shield belt are the two dominant pickups, and body armor is the one that you go for if you can't get any of the major ones. And the 5 pads is something most people even ignore, especially at high levels of play. Another function. Yeah.
How do jump boots factor into
Jump boots are technically not armor. They are a booster pickup, which I'll explain in a bit, which is also a room type. Weapon pickups. Generally, you'll have a room dedicated to the more significant pickups, like the rocket launcher. It either has a very open spot, because it's a very powerful weapon. You put it in a open area to get some risk reward factor in there. As in, I don't want to go directly at it if I'm not sure if there are not 3 players around me that will shoot me if I move out into the open. Keep in mind that placement of these items really depends on how open the room is. For example, if you have a very closed room with a low roof and nobody can actually see you while you're in that room, it's a very safe room to pick up a weapon. On the other hand, if you, for example, include the shock rifle, which is a bit of an oddball in Unreal, the shock combo where you shoot the pulse and then shoot it with the core, then it explodes and creates a massive burst. If you're in a very small room, you have nowhere to hide. So there is a automatic balance in Unreal to get people out of rooms. Another room type is generally booster pickup. You often see that, for example, the center area of your map holds a U damage or the berserker. Sometimes the jump boots are also kind of an oddball at times. They sometimes are just before ninja path, where you can jump up to a little ledge and make a shortcut through a level, or to get a very specific power up, so you can chain it a bit. So, for example, you can only reach the U damage if it's in a very high location, if you have to jump boots, or you do a rocket jump towards it to create that extra requirement, the level of skill to get the most powerful buffs in the game, which is very rewarding for good players, not so rewarding for the bad one. And each area must have a function. Still continues on. There are 2 other ones that are less common, but very important at times, depending on how intense your map is. If you have a very brutal level with very short contact times, whenever you have a fight with a player, you're probably going to take some damage, and at some point you'll want to run away and take some either ammunition, health packs, those kind of things. You can actually dedicate a room to that, and preferably a bit on the side of your level, so it's not in full contact. So players have some time to calm down, which is also a thing that you need to consider. Players that calm down in the resupply room tend to also use it as an Overwatch room. Sometimes these are separate rooms. And Overwatch essentially allows the player to take a look around. Okay, where is everyone? What is happening? What do I do in all this chaos? Especially in the 4-player deathmatch that's quite small, and you can keep track of your players. But the moment you start expanding even slightly, in Overwatch can be very useful to get the player into action quicker. It's like, oh, I see that there are 2 players there, I'll go that way. And each area must lead to at least 2 other functions. One-way areas are boring. If I go in a hallway and the only way to go is forward, there is no choice, no meaningful choice. And the side effect is, that a lot of people don't consider, is that I go in a long hallway and my opponent sees me going in a long hallway, he knows exactly where I'm going to come out. which is a major disadvantage. So first of all, it's boring. Second of all, it's predictable. Try to avoid one-way areas. And also leading to a similar function. For example, I just had an armor pickup, and the next room I go to is again an armor pickup. Why? Not very useful. Try to avoid those. Make it either a weapon pickup, a booster pickup, or something useful, something the player wants to actively have. So he has, when he's in one room and he knows that the two rooms next to it both have useful pickups, then he has to make a choice again. Which one do I take? Which one is more important? Which one suits my playstyle? After completing a function, it should never be useful to stay in this room. Kind of makes sense. Essentially prevents dominant strategies. If you notice during playtesting that your players are sticking in the same room all the time and staying there for extended periods, that might be due to some pickups that you have there. Are there health globes and armor in the same room? Is there a powerful weapon and health globes, for example? That means that the player can stay there for extended periods without ever dying, because he always has the benefit of just looking at all the possible entrances and shooting randomly. And then for a few minutes he can actually keep the entire room under control. Which is a bad thing, essentially, because other people want to walk around as well, and they are not prepared for someone camping in a room. Try to stick to triangle item placement. This is one that requires some explanation. This is a theoretical way of balancing your level, and I'll show you with some examples. So yeah, do note this is not a level schematic. This is just a theoretical diagram of how the timing between between pickups is. So you have the red armor, blue, mega health, and yellow armor. And the travel time between each of these is 10 seconds. Regardless of their actual position on the map. This is not the actual position on the map. It's just how long the travel time is between these. If everyone starts at equal distance to those, one player is going to run to the red, one is going to run to the blue, and then everyone is going to meet up at the yellow. So you can already predict where the first contact is going to be if the round starts. And each player will have a major buff. Now if we go to the second one, and we change a little bit, the player that goes for the blue has the benefit because he also has a shorter access to the yellow. So he's going to have the mega health and the yellow armor, which is more effective than just the shield belt in this case. In this situation, we introduce a ninja path, and now we all of a sudden get choice. So do I go for the red armor and then go for the yellow armor? If I can complete the ninja path, which require then the time to travel there is 5 seconds. For example, this would be rocket jumping up a wall to create a shortcut. Or this means that you need to do a tricky double jump somewhere that might fail. This once again creates choices. Like, do I go for the red and then for the yellow, or do I go for the blue and then for the yellow, or do I expect my opponent to go for the yellow and therefore I'll meet him halfway and shoot him? This creates this dynamic of trying to outsmart your opponent because you know what they're going to do. And then we start adding even more complexity. Okay, so if we start adding the weapon pickups in the same triangle shape, but this already looks like a very basic level. But keep in mind, you can just tweak the positioning. You could, for example, say the blue is going to be all the way over here, and then just make jump paths towards it. That effectively keeps the same travel time, but your level is no longer a mirror of itself. Just by creating distances, you create, for example, sniper positions. If you just accelerate the movement towards it with a jump pad that launches you a few hundred meters forward, you have all of a sudden have a completely separate area. However, to get there is only 2 seconds. Other things to consider, I already mentioned U damage in the central room. That really gets people moving. The moment it spawns, everyone will try and get it because it's by far the most powerful pickup. One-way or two-way ninja paths, can you actually go back? Interesting thing to consider. If I go for the yellow armor first and then go for the red armor, is that actually possible? So you can use this entire diagram, plan out your entire level in terms of travel time, and then actually build a level around it as well. Things that you also need to consider about ninja paths is punish the player who fails at making a ninja path. For example, is it a lethal one? How bad is it? How much time does he lose if he falls down? And you could even make a jump over a lava pit. Quite punishing. So only the players that actually know that they can make this jump will actually take it. Once again, this is to reward the expert players. However, it's not very casual friendly. So also keep in mind, what kind of target audience am I trying to approach here? How hardcore does this level need to be? And how exposed are the pickups when the player is collecting them? Generally, you see that the U damage is in a very open spot, as in the middle of a large open room, and whoever goes for it runs the risk of getting shot by everyone, because everyone's going for it. So the first one to get there is also the first one to get shot. And knowing that, all these answers, you already have a pretty decent approach to balancing your level. You haven't even started building it, which is good. So how do we help players to your level? It's nice when you, as an experienced player, know the map and you get around really easy. But players that are new to the game really need some guidance into where do I get the nice pickups, where do I get the U damage, where are all these objects located? And for that you use buff roads. Buff roads are a great tool to help you guide players towards the goal. And that goal is essentially functions of rooms, and then preferably guide them to the more powerful ones. This can tempt players to move, because as you'll notice that a lot of new players are actually the ones that are sticking in rooms, staying in the exact same spot. I found this rocket launcher, I'm going to stay here and then shoot everyone that moves through this door. That's very common. With buff routes, you can tempt them. It's like, hey, take all these lovely little pickups. You'll be stronger and you'll go somewhere else. You won't be standing still all the time. And you can hint towards ninja paths. Like, for example, if there's a little corridor that leads to a little jump pad, you can put a little trail of health files, and people will simply follow the health files and jump on the path. And hey, I didn't know this path existed. Great. So this is a simple example of how that looks. It's a little trail of health files. It's very effective. On the other hand, you do need to keep in mind that on high levels of play, people will purposefully avoid buff routes, simply because they make a distinct noise when you pick them up. If you take the average movement speed and you hear like boom, 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 any good player will instantly know, oh, he's over there in the map because I heard this pattern that I've heard before. So don't put buff routes everywhere. Generally consists of minor buffs. In UDK, this would be health packs, and health fails, not health packs, and some ammo packs can also be used. Unfortunately, UDK does not have armor shards like Quake does, and Half-Life does, and a lot of other games. So you're a bit limited to what you can actually use as buff routes. Another very important aspect is height levels.
Ogres are like onions. They stink? Yes. No. Oh, they make you cry? No. Oh, you leave them out in the sun, they get all brown, start sprouting little white heads? No. Layers. Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers? You get it. We both have layers. Oh, you both have layers. Oh. You know, not everybody likes onions.
So what's my point there? Death maps are like ogres or onions. Anyway, they have layers. And what I mean with that is that you have one room, then slightly above it another room, and then slightly above it another room. You create connections that can be made by just falling down, which is a lot more interesting and a lot faster than having to walk a staircase all the way up, and then realize like, oh, but my opponent is downstairs. And you have to walk all the way back again. It's not very interesting. However, falling down one level is really quick, changes your entire positioning, creates a lot of choices, it creates a lot of interesting new ways to move with your weapons. For example, rocket jumping is very effective with multiple layers of gameplay. If you also include jump pads and teleporters, this can really speed up your gameplay as well. You'll notice in UDK that at times the travel distance between rooms is very, very slow because UDK simply is not that fast of a game. If you compare it to Quake, for example, where you have this entire bunny hopping thing, you get a lot faster. But in UDK, if you really want to cater to hardcore players, you need to help them get around the level a bit faster. One easy way to do that is teleporters. However, be careful, teleporters can also disorientate new players quite a lot. If you don't know the level that well, and you're all of a sudden in a completely different room, where am I? What do I need to do here? Where did my opponent go? I have no clue. Jump pads, on the other hand, are a bit more clear because you can see if you place them properly, like with a little circle around the jump pad that indicates which direction it's going to go when I walk onto this thing. It's very clear to players, oh, it's going to launch me in that direction. Do I want to go there? Yes, I do. Jump on the jump pad. Very simple. And you instantly are on the other side of the level, even if you place the marker on all the way on the other side, which creates a very fast and dynamic game. So layers add movement options. They add a level of risk, falling down, also fun. You can, especially with the shock rifle, it has quite a bit of knockback, so you can push people off edges and possibly into pits and all kinds of humiliating things, which ties in with the motivation of players again. The rocket jumping, for example, and you can also, no wait, that's only in Quake, you can do that in UDK. So in short, ogres, onions, and layers are great for creating choice. On to flow. Flow, the ability to switch paths and navigate through a level effortlessly and efficiently. Let's take a little look-see at that. Yeah, no. It's not a look. This is a special game mode in Quake 3, and it really demonstrates how flow works. These levels have been specifically made to abuse movement mechanics in a fluid way. So flow. Flow is a bit of a tricky thing to describe at times. It's mainly about the feel of a level, how dynamic it feels and how you can move around in the level. And it also depends on how good you are as a player, of how you experience flow in a level. Generally for beginners, flow is the obvious paths. Can I find what I want to find? Can I find a piece of armor? Can I find a rocket launcher and actually shoot at people? Can I get the basic motivations of playing a shooter? For advanced players, this becomes a bit more tricky. Do I have the ability to use my game skill in investing hundreds of hours in this game to actually be better at it? Do I get to move around faster than other players? Do I get to have this benefit over other players? So flow for advanced players is a bit more tricky to create because you need to consider the fact that they have movement tricks that other players do not. And for pro level, it's even harder because they literally abuse every little aspect of your system. So as you noticed in the earlier movies where with Quake and jumping around through the entire level, that level was not suitable for a pro level match because it's simply not built for that kind of movement. Pickups are in too close to each other. They could literally pick up all the pickups in 5 seconds. That's not going to work for a deathmatch level. Flow is very important. If flow is not there, your level is going to be horrible. And there is no instant formula of how to create flow in your level. This requires a lot of testing. And don't be afraid to rip out an entire section of your level if it just doesn't feel right. It's better to remove an area, try literally removing the entire area and see if your level has flow then, and then slap it back with a door in a different place, because it can be very little things that, for example, a little crate that you bump into all the time can disrupt your flow of your level. The fact that you can't look around the corner and that someone is always standing around the corner somewhere and always shoots you in the back disrupts the flow of your level. So it's also dependent on how other players play the level. Blind spots, lines of sight, all kinds of little things that influence flow. And there is no matter how good the theory behind it all, it comes down to how the level feels and flows. This once again, test your level. I spent roughly 45 hours of playtesting with an entire hardcore team of professional players on my level. And the amount of hours I afterwards spent on iterating is ridiculous. And it's the only way to get your level flow decent. I'm still not happy with it, but you know, there's a limited amount of time you can spend on the level, especially for this assignment. But you need to be sure that the flow is working. Item placement can be fixed. Flow of the level not. And do we want to break?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. So on to visibility. Some very important things to keep in mind. What can the player see from what location? This is where the Overwatch comes into play. It's like, where can you see the other players? Is there a dominant spot where I can stand, where I can snipe at people? There is no sniper rifle in UDK, so effectively your shock rifle becomes somewhat of a replacement of that. It is very tricky to do very long distance shots, however, in UDK, because you can't zoom. So be aware that new players will not be actively sniping. So try to keep that in mind. Try to keep your sightlines as short as possible, because the weapons aren't actually catered for long range fights. You can try and add the sniper rifle in UDK. I advise against it because it's going to give you more headaches than actually a sniper rifle in game. Also a very important thing is what can he not see. If a player is in a resupply area, for example, can he see the player? Can anyone see that player from the position? Is there somewhat of an exposure to certain areas? How important is the function of the room? The more important it is, the more visibility you want to give to the player that is in that room going for the powerful pickup. People need to be aware, hey, this player is getting something very important. I want him to not have this and I want to react to that. But if they can't see him or they simply don't know where he is, there is no choice in reacting to a pickup. What can your opponent see and find out indirectly? As in, if I take the buff route, does the player on the other side of the map hear that? Check the distances of noises. This is very tricky. You need to do multiplayer for this to actually check these things, and they are very, very in-depth level design aspects, but they do play a role. For example, when I pick up the U damage, there's a sound trigger. Who can hear it? What rooms can actually hear this trigger? That they are notified that, hey, someone picked up view damage, I need to be careful now. Another thing that you can use are light triggers. This is what I use in Ronin Monastery mostly. So whenever a player was in a key location, they would trigger a light that would go on and mark like, hey, there's someone in this area. I don't know exactly where, but that they are in this area. This also helps with visualizing where people are and how they can react to this. So if players are able to analyze the level and go like, hey, I just noticed that these items are missing, this has just been picked up. Because of that, can I here, or C, where my opponent is. Keep in mind that if you're in a certain location from one room with one function, looking at different function, can I see the actual pickup from one room in the other? Does that mean that I can shoot at him? Is the weapon that I probably have in this room suited for shooting at that location? Keep those things in mind. If it's not suited for that location, how do I have cover in case my opponent actually does have a weapon that is suited for firing back at me? Players will constantly be checking for this. At some point, when you get to very high levels of play, people do this automatically, where they simply know all the timings of all the pickups. For example, if I play Quake 3, I literally have 3 timers running in my head. Okay, red armor is going to respawn in 16 seconds, yellow armor is going to be there in 10 seconds, and the Q damage still has 23 seconds. And these things become second nature if you play them on. Player orientation depends largely on how well they know the level and how it looks. How it looks is something that is quite tricky in the white box, but something that you do need to consider. And I recommend grabbing an artist once in a while to look at your level, like, hey, how do you think we could make this a visually different room from all the other ones? Think in themes, think of a library, think of not just the function of a room, but also how it looks and how it's going to be different, both in lighting, in the theme, in the way you place structures like crates and other obstacles, preferably not crates, crates are bad. So that you have a visual identification of, okay, this is this room. I know what is in this room, I know where I am, and I know where I need to go if I want XYZ pickup. Some examples of this in my level. Teleporter room had a green light. The Mega Health room had a blue light. Whenever someone was in that would go on. And in the bottom right you see the sniper tower. Whenever someone was in the sniper tower, the red light would go on. So everyone was aware, like, oh, if I now move in the open area, I'm probably going to get shot. This helps players, but it also is confusing at times when there are too many lights on at the same time. You get too many choices. So be careful that you don't do this for every room, because then it becomes quite annoying actually. So on to UDK. Some love it, some hate it. I personally like it. You really don't have a choice right now, so better get used to it. It is a very powerful tool and you can do a lot with it, but it has some drawbacks. And your job is to make something awesome with it. But first start on paper. I hope that you already all are at the stage of starting to build things and not still drawing, because time issues. I spent roughly 120 hours, possibly more, for this assignment. You could probably do it with less if you cut some corners here and there, especially in the testing part, but I advise against that, of course, because you want an awesome level. So you start off with making some basic sketches, sketch problems, before you spend hours on building them. You're learning a new tool, so you're not as fast as making iterations as, for example, you're going to be in block 4 when you're building a level in 1 day. Essentially, you can build one in 10 hours. But the first time you're probably going to spend a lot more, as in more like 40 hours to get your basic block out done. Keep in mind that if you want to change things, you really should be building in modular pieces. Simple entire groups of, this is an entire room that you can select, drag, move around. And preferably also pieces that you can reuse, like simple art pieces, as in the wall segment that is roughly as big as, not roughly, exactly as big as the other wall section in your level somewhere else. Your artists will love you if you do this, because it makes making the art for your level so much faster. It makes designing the level a lot easier as well, because you work with the same sizes all the time, so you don't run into issues that I had at some point, where I had wall sections that were 24 units bigger than the other one. which means that I need to make a 24 unit little tiny block everywhere, and then the artists cry a bit because then they need to model a art piece that is 24 units big. Keep in mind a unit in UDK is 2 centimeters, so modeling a 48 centimeter wall piece is really not that great. And it looks weird, so they essentially had to reconstruct my entire white box to properly build it as an art thing. So don't wait too long, because it will suck up hours and hours of your time to block. And it's very important that you start iterating very early on. So the moment you have a playable version, start playing with bots. Drop a bunch of the path nodes in your level so the bots can navigate properly. And start seeing where issues happen, where some sight lines don't work out as you want them to because you're constantly shooting against a little corner of the wall. That are little hints that some things in your level might not be that great. If you constantly get stuck behind a little pillar, for example, because you're trying to run past it and you get stuck, clear indication like, hey, this is breaking my flow, I possibly need to make it a little bit of an arc in there, or simply remove it. That's also always a great option, removing things. Things to do, stick to the grid, please. I did it mostly, but for some sections I didn't, and that really took hours and hours and hours of my time. If you stick to a very large grid size, like preferably 64 units or 32 units on your grid, especially in the start, it's really easy because you can just use very large blocks and move them around. And only when you are happy with the very large blocks, you start scaling down your grid and then start making more detailed pieces that are, for example, cover areas or little sidewalks or all these kind of little elements. Only do them after you've built the really big block out. This also prevents a lot of issues with having holes in your geometry because they don't line up. The bigger your grid is, the less likely you are to mess up with having something 1 pixel off and then creating a lighting issue. And, well, it makes the level a bit more pleasing to the eye as well, which is also nice. Don't make gigantic set pieces. Don't try to model them. Just make a cylinder, like roughly the size of what you want it to be, place it there. Let the artist worry about making that awesome dragon statue that we had in that level. Simply don't make that yourself. It's going to take hours, and we don't have those. Next to the fact it's not your job. You just need to make a reference, like, hey, this looks roughly like this dragon, and this cylinder is exactly where I want it. And I took it into consideration for gameplay because it is something that you can shoot, and it is something that stops bullets. So you need to consider the fact that you can take cover behind it. So just use cylinders and basic geo shape, so that you take them into consideration for gameplay, but not the actual art element. And try to not use a subtract tool too much. It gets messy. The way UDK works is every time you remove something, it leaves a little box which actually is a placeholder of where the things used to be. If you have a lot of these stacked on top of each other and you try to remove something or you move it just a few units to the left or right, all these things break. So try to not use them. Try to just build with blocks on top of each other, like do the Minecraft way instead of subtracting, and because you're not actually removing things, you're just hiding them. Well, there's an entire list of UDK tutorials there that I used. You can look these up later on. There's also a basic Kismet scripting. This is, I think, not required as far as I know. No, okay. If you want, for example, a moving door or a light, you can learn this in about an hour. And it can add a lot to your gameplay. Especially for the visibility, like the light switches. Identifying a room by color makes it very easy for players to navigate. Also solves a lot of issues that you have in whiteboxing, where all your walls are the same. You can slap on textures, or you can simply just put a colored light there, and all of a sudden it's a identified room. It's like, oh, this is the green room, this is the red room. And players associate rooms with the pickups that are there. People say, oh, I'm in the rocket launcher room. They don't say, I'm in the generator room with the curly little thing in the corner. They look at what can I get there, what is there to pick up. So keep those in mind. Especially with lighting, you can do a lot early on in the game, and it's also really easy to do. So that was my presentation. Are there any questions?
Any questions, anybody?
Could you maybe give an example of how you would, like, go into a little bit more detail how you would build something to be artist friendly, for example?
Use blocks, very simple blocks that are all the same size. The way the artists are going to make elements of your level is they build modular art pieces.
Right.
For example, a wall segment that is a X amount of units long. And they'll preferably tile these multiple times next to each other. If you use the exact same block size in UVK for your white box, you prevent the issue where you have 5 of these blocks and then a half one. That half one is going to break up their art. So if you can manage to make nice little blocks that always fit properly in that size, preferably in units of 8 or 16 or, you know.
256 is a very popular number.
Yeah.
That's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. I think that's like 2 times 2 again.
They tend to work, so try to stick to the logical sizes in the UK, and don't go for realism, because it simply doesn't work. If you look into, yes, 1 unit is 2 centimeters, but due to how the camera works in the first-person shooter, it's never going to feel realistic. Things are going to look as if they're disproportionate anyway. So don't try to go for realism in that sense.
But basically, you should tile everything.
Yeah, tile as much as possible.
Yeah, use metrics, use standard measurements as much as you possibly can. So I was playing on Dirks yesterday, and we're just looking at door sizes. And if you're looking on the basic checkerboard, it can give you a really big clue of how you're doing on this. Some of the doors were like 2 checkerboard squares wide, and some of them were 2.5, and others were 3, and the others were 3.5. And immediately my artist warning noises are going off in the background, going, artists are going to hate you, artists are going to hate you. So yeah, if you start using non-standard metrics all across your level, but if you need to have different door sizes, it's fine, but then just try and pick two, like a double-sized one and a single-sized one, and stick with that rather than having 5.
Another thing that you also might want to consider is my level, the building that I have, is it architecturally sound? In the dome that I have in the Dragon Monastery is not physically possible, which got me a lot of hate from my artists. They were constantly crying about the fact this dome cannot be supported by this structure whatsoever. So, yeah. So effectively, the dragons that are placed in all the corners are to cover up the fact that the structure is actually not possible.
Yeah, damn it, those Dragon Monastery people, they don't build realistic.
No, but it can break a sense of immersion.
Yeah, that just means they need to be more creative with their support structures.
I agree. You can do a lot of things in design as well to prevent some.
Yeah, well, they could have done it with metal and glass or something.
They're just not there.
What would you say is the maximum effective range of like the shot rifle versus the longer range?
It highly depends on the skill of the player. If you remember the, let's see, where did I have it? There we are. This sniper spot all the way over there, if you shoot a rocket, it takes roughly 12 seconds to get there, which is a ridiculous amount.
Yeah.
You can actually jump down the sniper tower, take the teleporter, take the other teleporter, and arrive at that location faster than the rocket gets there. You can actually shoot yourself.
It's not worse. Like 5, maybe 3 or 4.
It's actually really, really long.
It's about 3 or 4 seconds, but I think your perception of how long something takes in a game is different from mine because you're a hardcore player. It's about 3 or 4. I've tested this on people's maps and counted them. I know, God,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boom! Okay, and those were huge.
Okay.
So it's not as long as you think, but
it feels forever at least, because there were some occasions where I was playing with it. I was like, okay, I'm going to see if I can shoot myself 3 times with a rocket before they actually hit the wall, and it was possible.
There's a reason I let Thomas get away with making this map, in that from the beginning he'd very, very explicitly be aiming at a hardcore audience. And a hardcore audience needs a bit more space, because they can move faster, they can navigate quicker, they can exploit the game physics in ways that a normal player can't. And so having a map that's this huge, you can kind of get away with it. If you're aiming this at the average player, which most of you guys will be, especially if you don't have the sort of 10,000 hours of gameplay experience, I would recommend aiming it for a normal player, which is also more like the people who are going to be testing it, like me. I'm okay, I'm pretty good by standard normal people, but frankly I'm nowhere probably near as good as Thomas is.
Okay, I don't know, because I won't be
so this kind of map I can play fairly effectively on, but not to the level that a pro can. But you'll be aiming it slightly lower than this, so this might be on the large side. This is kind of on the large side of acceptable.
And especially to come back to the shock rifle range, if they're pro players, they will actually hit the other side of the map with accuracy.
The beam is almost instantaneous too.
It is instant,
yeah. But at this point you can see how big the crosshair is. And the player on the other side of the level is probably half the size of the crosshair.
Yeah, about. Yeah.
So it's very precise aim, and most players won't be able to do this, 10 times in a row. And it's also very, very tricky to even know if the player is there and anticipate the movement, things like that. So I would say actually half of that level is the maximum range you could use for a shock rifle for casual players. And even then it's already pushing it.
Yeah, we've mentioned it in a couple of other lectures, but I'll say it again. 4096 by 4096 is kind of as big as you want to make your map for a 4-player thing. It's like that's that, and obviously that'll change depending on how much verticality and how much layering there is and things like that. But if you're going bigger than that as a floor space, 4096 is kind of as big as you want to make it. I believe again that's a multiple. Yeah.
Question on that, do you mean that per room or entirely for the whole room?
Entire map.
Yeah, I think my entire level is exactly that size.
Yeah.
Minus some corners.
Yeah. Now see this is a little bit unusual in that there's not a vast amount of layering in it.
Mm-hmm.
There's this spot up here, I think, is one of the few bits of layering that's effectively in there.
Yeah,
but again, it's
and
because
the opposite side, there's a little corner there, but that's about it.
Yeah, there's not a lot layering in this one. Again, Thomas was quite unusual in getting away with this. It's very unusual to see a map that's actually this well balanced that works with this little layering. But again, it's to do with the target audience. Sydney, you had a question?
I haven't tried this yet, but can you shoot through portals?
No.
No.
You can see through them, but you can't shoot through them.
If you can get that to work.
Were they that difficult?
Well, last year I think the portals were quite bugged in general. But
Okay. They all seem to work on the ones I saw.
okay. Yeah.
Everyone got them working anyway.
Yeah, they work. They just couldn't see through them.
Oh, okay. I think I was testing. Any other questions? Okay, I've got one for you. How do you feel about ammo? And if you're aiming this at an average player, how do you feel about ammo pickups?
Very tricky depending on the weapon. Shock rifles on a sniper location, for example, I prefer to not put them there. First of all, because the amount of time that they're going to be spending there is already large, and if you extend that further by giving them more ammo, it gets really tricky to get them moving at all. For rocket launcher, I only put them in different rooms where the actual rocket launcher is, because it's already such a dominant weapon. The pulse rifle is a tricky one because it has automatic regeneration of ammo, so you don't need that much ammo. On the other hand, if you pick it up the second time, it starts firing faster, and then you can really drain your ammo really quickly. So I tend to use the pulse rifle ammo in dog routes. Rocket launcher ammo is generally a bit out of the way of the player, so he actually has to move out of his way, actually give him a bit of a penalty for having to pick up rocket launcher ammo, because he already has a very, very powerful weapon. Especially with loading 3 rockets up and then firing at the same time, you can pretty much one-shot anyone.
Which is different from how I feel about it, which I thought it would be. Which is why I am. Because I'm not actually that much of a fan of putting down ammo in UDK, because usually the lifespan of an average player is pretty short, and they're not usually going to use up the ammo they've got in their gun. And if they do use up the ammo they've got in their gun, it just forces them to go and find a different one, which forces movement on them. I'm very much of the opinion that if you could pick up ammo, and if you've got no gun for it, it's really annoying. So if you want to have something there, just put a gun there instead. That's my personal feeling on it, but I thought that Thomas was going to have a different feeling on it, which is why I wanted to ask him. And it's good for you to hear different views on this. There is no right answer on this one. I personally feel like just put a weapon down, or health files. Just use health files for easy people around. My personal feeling, but it's different for hardcore players. Because if hardcore players are going to last longer, they're going to run out of ammo more often, which is going to be annoying to them. Whereas an average player is probably going to die every 30 seconds. And they're not going to live long enough to be using up the ammo either.
The distinct difference between casual and hardcore players is that generally casual players, when they meet someone, they fight to the death. They simply do not run away. They just keep on shooting, hoping that they'll win. Hardcore players are, first of all, they know which pickups the opponent has. It's like, oh, he probably has this pickup, that pickup, so I can't win this fight, realistically, because he's roughly just as good at shooting as me. So they are on equal grounds on skill-based, but the amount of pickups then determines who's going to win. And if he knows the amount of pickups the opponent has, he simply runs away. So then all of a sudden the amount of lifetime you have gets a lot longer. So you will be shooting, but you won't be dying, and then ammo factors in a lot more.
Yeah. Also, you tend to find that hardcore players will just continue on their flow route. They might adjust their flow, because they might usually go that way because it's fastest, the best pickup, but there's somebody in the way, so they'll just go there. But they won't actually stop running because they see someone. Whereas more average players, such as myself, will see someone and go, okay, I'll dodge around and see if I can take him out. Whereas the hardcore players just go bang, 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 okay, bye, off and going again. They just keep on moving all the time between the different spaces, because picking the pickup up is more important than killing the people, because there'll be somebody else they'll see in 2 seconds anyway, because they move so bloody fast through the level. So, yeah.
Yeah, another main difference in casual versus hardcore is in casual play it's about killing people, and in hardcore it's about pickup control, where people start counting, okay, in 30 seconds this armor is going to respawn, and if I pick it up, nobody else can. That makes everyone else in a worse position. And that's the core motivation, constantly having the upper hand in pickups, and not so much in the fact that I have a bigger gun and I'm not going to shoot people.
There's one other point I'd like to say, so about buffers. So for example, usually there's health files going along here, but someone's picked them up, so they're not there. So if you're using health files to lead somebody through the level, bear in mind somebody else might have picked them up, so nobody's going to get through the led through the level by those health files if they're not there. So you want your geometry to also be suggesting the way to move through the level, and the health files are just an advantage on top of that. Health files are really good for leading people's eyes and drawing people to run in certain directions. You can make kind of the respawn rate different to make them, if you really need to make sure this is always highlighted, make sure the respawn rate is quite fast. But try and suggest it with lighting and geometry as well. I always think of kind of pickups as kind of a polish level on top of really solid geometry. You shouldn't just try and make your level work purely through pickups. You do have to make sure the geometry is working first.
Yeah, also a very important thing is, I think I mentioned it, but suggestive geometry, for example for the jump pad here, it's pretty small, but there's a little extension there that you have this normal wall, and then there's this little area sticking outside with the jump pad, which is clearly signaling, hey, if I go here, I'll be launched in that direction. Which is literally the geometry that's telling you where you're going to go. It's not the jump pad that's telling that, it's the placement of where the jump pad is in relation to the floor.
And also you know that the player isn't going to be coming onto this. So I think I talked about this before, but if this was our route along here and the jump pad's there, you will expect the player will always be facing this direction when they hit the jump pad. If that jump pad launches them sideways, that's going to be annoying to them. So what you could do is you could put a little extra stubby bit here, so you know the player will have to have at least started turning in that direction when they hit the jump pad, so it'll feel natural for them to continue turning in that direction when they go off it. So they'll be facing in the direction they're travelling, which is going to be a lot more natural experience for them.
Yeah, it heavily ties into how your level flows.
Yeah. Yeah, this kind of tweaking where you start putting little bits out, making sure the jump pads are feeling like they're flowing nicely. This is getting towards the more polished stage of it, but it's something you really want to spend time on. I mean, Thomas says he spent 40 hours just playing his level. I did one on AVP, which was a kind of co-op board mode, which I spent 40 hours playing that mode with other people in the team and by myself to try and balance it. It only takes 10 minutes. The entire thing, if you survive really well, sometimes about 3 minutes. When I spent 40 hours, and it was things like there was a corridor, and there'd be it just had a little barrier on the side of it that you couldn't jump over. It was just a little bit too high to jump over. And there was a health pack at the end. Now, if you got to the end of the health pack and turned around, there's a shitload of aliens coming at you. It's really dangerous, which was quite fun, which made it fun to go and get the health pack, but it was always a risk. And we spent ages just tweaking the distance, that there was a break in this that you could run out through. Sometimes it's really close to it, sometimes it's a little bit further away, and just trying to get that absolute balance right was really tricky. Now I know Thomas has said he doesn't like subtractive elements in games, in DSP. I like using subtractive stuff for doors, because if it's just a single box, it's so much easier to pick up that box and just move it a few feet across, or meters or whatever, just move it a little bit further across than it is to get that bit of the wall and adjust that bit of the wall, and then get the next bit of the wall and adjust that bit of the wall. Because sometimes you'll find that you move this bit to 256 and you move this bit 192, and suddenly your doorway's a different width, and you start messing up with your metrics. So it's easier to keep your metrics in tune if you're using the same subtractive box for the size of the doorway everywhere in the level. So there are advantages, and for doorways it is particularly good.
For doorways I completely agree. For simple shape building,
yeah, you don't want to build rooms the way that Ronnie first showed you, I would say, which was do a cube and then do a subtractive volume inside the cube.
No.
No, I just don't like that. I'd go build 4 walls, put a roof on it, personally.
Yeah, because then you can simply select one of the walls and extrude it upwards if you need to change the room.
Yep.
Instead of also having to select the little removal and then also extrude that and having issues with that. They also cause quite a few bugs in the UK. So.
But I think Justin was saying he's having trouble with subtractive volumes.
Yeah, the problem is when you have a cylinder, it's far more difficult to make a wall, a cylinder wall, or a round wall. So therefore I use like a cylinder and I made a subtraction of another cylinder in it. And in the cylinder there's another cylinder, which is basically the platform. So yeah, making a wall out of the entire circle is kind of tedious. So that's why I chose to do subtraction. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets more tricky when you're using shapes that are not a cube.
Yeah.
Anything that is not a cube gets tricky in VK, especially when you're trying to modify that shape.
Yeah. It's part of the reason I said to stick to kind of octagons rather than circles, because it just makes life so much easier. Whenever you go to circles, it just gets difficult. Okay.
So sorry. What are your thoughts about using pickup baits to guide a player versus sort of visual communication?
How so? Can you give me an example?
You could make a path of tiny health pickups, but you could also make an arc, because people are attracted to walking through there, and make it a bit more lighter than another path to attract the player in that direction.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing that you can consider. You can even modify that slightly by, for example, having a elevated area with the rocket launcher on top that is clearly visible, but you can't reach it. So people will actually move towards it and then realize, hey, I can't get here. Let's search around on how do I get up on top of that.
Encourages movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's Both, preferably use both, really. Because like I say, sometimes those pickups would have been picked up, so people still need to be able to find the route. So if you could make it visually alluring as well as using pickups, then that's kind of the ideal world. But you do need to make sure the architecture can work by itself, preferably. So if the pickups have already gone, you still need to make the level work. So yeah, but you know, using both is good because people like picking up stuff. Who here likes going shopping? Yeah, for cool things. You know, I'm not like going buying bread or anything like that.
No polish, mate.
Yeah. So like going buy a computer game, it's quite fun to go out and buy a game and go, I know it's full price, fuck it, I'm going to buy it today. That's quite nice because we've got this kind of thing built into us, this acquisitional desire to pick up stuff. And it feels nice to pick up stuff in the game, even if it's just a tiny little stuff. Yeah, it's just like running through and there's got this little noise and a little thing and you go big and little numbers come up and that's nice. And it feels good to pick up stuff in games. So it's a way of encouraging people to move around.
So then why are you objecting against ammo pickups? Because they still...
I'm saying use health files instead. I say use health files instead. Because if you pick up there's nothing more annoying than you buy something, you realise you've got it, like, you thought you were buying the PS3 version, but you bought the Xbox version.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but, you know, if you buy something, you suddenly realise you can't use it. So if you pick up, like, pulse rifle ammo, but you don't have a pulse rifle, that's actually annoying. Whereas if you pick up a health file, it's always going to be good.
Because I'm not constantly looking at my different kinds of ammo, I just look how much I can shoot. It's not still something I
The
need
thing
to
is,
track.
it highly depends on the game as well. If you look, for example, at Painkiller or Quake 3, they use armor shards as an initial minor pickup. So that allows your level to have multiple of these different types of clock routes. You can also highlight certain areas. Okay, this is a health pickup, so it's probably going to lead to something. You can teach a player, like if you follow the health pickups, you're going to go to a armor pickup, and the other way around. If you pick up armor shards, you're going to go to a major health upgrade.
Okay, I think people are getting tired, judging by the amount of fidgeting going on. So, got two options, guys. We can either have one big session where people kind of come up and show the levels, I play it and I critique those levels, or we can have the two sessions as it's set up in the roster, where I spend an hour with whoever's first and an hour with whoever's second, and I kind of go around more individually. What would you prefer? I'm okay with either way.
The second one.
Second one? Okay, second one it is. So I'll see some of you in about 20 minutes, and I guess I'll see the rest of you in about an hour and 20 minutes. Thanks very much, guys. Once again, thank you, Thomas. Cheers.